She became the millionaire's Christmas wife for 4 days, but her heart broke on day 5. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Tears blurred the twinkling lights as Elena stood before the towering wooden door of the Hale estate, the cold biting through her thin coat. Snowflakes clung to her lashes, but they weren't the reason her hands trembled. Less than a day ago, her life had collapsed in a way that felt almost theatrical if it hadn't happened to her. Fired without warning as her company slashed staff before Christmas. Betrayed by a boyfriend she had planned to propose to that very night. Kicked out of her apartment for being late on rent. Christmas had arrived not with warmth, but with the weight of everything she had lost. And then, as if life wasn't strange enough, she had stumbled across a man being attacked outside a luxury hotel, tall, sharply dressed, bleeding from a cut on his cheek as a stranger lunged at him. Elena, acting on instinct rather than sense, shouted and threw her bag at the attacker just long enough for the man to flee. He had looked at her afterward with stunned disbelief, as though no one had ever intervened for him before. That man now stood a few steps behind her, his voice steady, crisp, and impossibly calm as he repeated the sentence that had brought her here. "I need a wife for 4 days. If you agree, I'll take care of everything you're facing." Elena swallowed hard, her breath forming clouds in the freezing air. A 4-day wife for the millionaire, and why her? She didn't know that the moment she crossed this threshold would begin a chain of events that would change her heart and break it by day 5. She clutched her bag closer as the door opened with a low creak, revealing the warm glow of chandeliers inside. The contrast between the opulence of the entry hall and her snow-dampened boots made her hesitate. "You should come in," Callum said from behind her. His tone wasn't unkind, just practiced, controlled, like a man who had rehearsed detachment for years. Elena stepped inside, half expecting someone to shout that she didn't belong here, but the grandeur was silent, watching. She turned slightly to look at Callum. His expression remained unreadable, sharp jaw, dark eyes, and the faintest trace of exhaustion hidden beneath his polished exterior. There was no doubt he was wealthy. Everything about him radiated power. But there was something else too, something wounded. He gestured toward a side room, and she followed him into a smaller, quieter study. A fire crackled softly, illuminating a sleek folder placed neatly on the table. "The agreement," he said, nodding at it. Elena stared. "You really meant it. I don't make offers I don't intend to keep." "Why me?" He didn't answer right away, walking instead to the window, the firelight cutting across the angles of his face. "Because you stopped," he said finally. "Most people don't stop when danger is involved. That's not a real reason to marry someone. It's a reason to trust you," he countered softly. Elena didn't know what to do with that. No one, especially not someone like him, spoke of trusting her. Not recently, not after the disaster of the last 24 hours. She forced herself to focus. What exactly would I have to do, act as my wife during Christmas? Dinners, photographs, conversations. My family needs to see stability. They're insistent. "About what?" "That I settle down." His jaw tightened. "For business reasons. And after 4 days we go our separate ways and you walk away with a fresh start. Housing, job connections, financial support, whatever you need." He paused as if choosing his next words carefully. "I won't let you fall apart right before Christmas." Her chest tightened. No one had offered to help her without strings, and here he was offering everything with strings made of cold honesty rather than deception. Elena lowered herself into the chair and opened the folder. The language was professional, direct. Temporary spouse, public companion, confidentiality required. Duration, December 22nd to December 26th. Her pulse quickened when she reached the line, "Emotional involvement is strictly prohibited." She looked up sharply. "Is this really necessary?" "Very," he replied. Something in his voice told her the rule wasn't just for her sake. She hesitated for a long moment. Then, with nothing left to lose and a strange pull in her chest she didn't want to acknowledge, she picked up the pen and signed her name. Callum reached into his coat pocket and set a simple silver ring in front of her. Elena frowned at the faint scratch across the band as though it had a story she wasn't meant to know. "This is a prop," he said too quickly. Her stomach tightened at the edge in his tone, but she slipped the ring on anyway. It fit perfectly. He stepped closer. "Ready? No," she admitted honestly. "But I'll go." They walked back toward the hall, and when Callum opened the doors to the main room, warm voices and soft laughter spilled out. Elena straightened instinctively. Then a woman's sharp voice cut through the room the moment they stepped in. "You brought another one home, Callum." Elena froze, pulse hammering. Another one. Callum stiffened beside her, his hand brushing hers as if to steady her. And Elena realized she had barely stepped into his world, yet it already felt like she was trespassing on someone else's ghost. Elena's pulse stuttered as the woman's voice echoed through the grand hall. Conversations faltered, eyes turned, and a dozen unfamiliar faces assessed her with the same curiosity someone might give a stray cat that wandered into a gala. Callum's hand brushed against hers, not quite a touch more, like a silent reminder to breathe. But she wasn't sure she could. "She looks familiar," one woman whispered as Elena stepped forward. Almost too familiar. Elena's spine tingled. Familiar. How could she look familiar in a world she'd never belonged to? A tall, elegant woman with silver-streaked hair, Margaret Hale, if Elena remembered correctly, stepped closer. Her eyes sharp and assessing swept over Elena with the precision of a judge evaluating evidence. So Margaret said, voice smooth but edged with steel, "This is your wife?" Callum nodded once. "Elena." Margaret's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Pretty, polite, but her gaze lingered as if searching for something only she could see. "I suppose we'll learn more at dinner." Elena swallowed. That didn't sound like an invitation, it sounded like a test. As they moved deeper into the hall, a man with a charming smirk leaned close enough for only Elena to hear. "You don't know what you've walked into, sweetheart," he murmured, "but it's entertaining to watch. Julian." She remembered his name from the introduction Callum had rushed through minutes earlier. His tone held the casual cruelty of someone who enjoyed chaos. Before she could respond, Callum's fingers closed gently around her wrist. "Ignore him," he said under his breath. "He thrives on stirring trouble." "I noticed," she whispered. The dining room was already filling when they entered. A long table adorned with crystal glasses and evergreen garlands stretched across the space. Elena sat beside Callum, feeling every eye on her. Her heartbeat thudded loud enough she was certain the entire Hale family could hear it. "Tell us," a distant cousin said with a practiced smile. "What is Callum's favorite winter dish?" Elena froze. She didn't know. Callum didn't even look up from his plate as he answered calmly. "Roasted herb salmon. Elena makes it beautifully." Elena blinked, startled by how effortlessly he covered for her. The cousin's eyebrows rose with interest, and soon the questions piled on how they met, how long they'd been together, what their first date was. Elena tried to follow the stories they'd agreed upon, but details blurred under pressure. Callum seamlessly filled the gaps, his tone steady, his hand brushing hers under the table every time she began to falter. Each subtle touch sent warmth up her arm, dangerous warmth she shouldn't feel. When dinner ended, Margaret requested a family photo to commemorate Callum's first Christmas with his wife. Callum stepped behind Elena, placing his hand on her waist. The weight of it was light, practiced, yet something in the gesture felt real, grounding. The photographer counted down. 3, 2. Callum's thumb brushed her hip just once. Elena's breath hitched, but the moment the camera flashed, Callum stepped back as if burned. After the photo, Elena moved toward the hall to catch her breath, but she didn't make it far before a young woman intercepted her, a cousin maybe with glossy lips and eyes like sharpened glass. "You shouldn't get comfortable," the woman said softly. "Looking the way you do. You must know why everyone's staring." Elena frowned. "I don't understand." The woman tilted her head. "Of course you don't." Her smile twisted. "You look like her. That's the problem." Before Elena could ask who, the woman drifted away like she dropped a spark and walked before it could ignite. Confusion coiled tight in Elena's stomach. "Look like who?" She glanced around searching for Callum, but he was across the room talking stiffly with a pair of businessmen. His posture was rigid shoulders, high voice clipped. For a fleeting second, their eyes met. Something flickered there, something almost like fear before he looked away. Elena stepped out of the hall and into a quieter corridor needing air. The walls were lined with framed portraits of the Hale family, each one immaculate, traditional, frozen in time. Her gaze skimmed them until she reached the end table where a photo lay face down. Odd. She hesitated, then turned it upright. A couple. Callum, younger, softer in expression, and beside him a woman with dark hair and gentle eyes. The woman looked unsettlingly like Elena. Her breath caught. A floorboard creaked behind her. She spun. Callum stood in the doorway, half-shadowed, one hand tucked into his pocket. His expression was unreadable, but tension radiated off him like heat. "You wandered far from the party," he said quietly. Elena held the photo to her chest. This was face down. His jaw tightened. "It's old." "Who was she?" Elena whispered. Callum's gaze flickered to the photo, then away. "Not part of our agreement, but everyone keeps looking at me like what?" His voice was calm, but too carefully controlled. "Like I'm her," Elena said, softly. Silence stretched between them. For a moment she thought he might tell her the truth, but instead he stepped closer, only to take the photo gently from her hands and place it face down again. "You don't need to worry about the past," he said. "Just focus on the next 4 days." Elena opened her mouth to speak, but he was already turning toward the hall. She stared at the photo lying face down once more. A chill, not from the winter air, slid down her spine. If she wasn't supposed to worry about the past, why did it feel like the past was staring straight at her? Elena lingered in front of the guest room mirror, longer than she meant to, fingertips brushing the place on her shoulder where Callum's hand had rested the night before. It had been such a small gesture, protective, instinctive, but her body remembered it too well. She scolded herself under her breath. This was acting, a performance, nothing more. But her heart refused to obey logic as neatly as the contract demanded. When she finally stepped into the hallway, the murmur of voices led her toward the breakfast room. The long table was already filled with relatives, china gleaming beneath soft morning light. Callum sat at the head posture crisp, the picture of composed authority. Yet when he saw her enter, something softened in his eyes, just for a second before he straightened again. "Elena dear," someone called. "Come sit beside your husband." Husband! The word still felt foreign, ill-fitting, like a borrowed coat she wasn't sure she deserved to wear. As she took her seat, Callum gently pulled her chair in a polite gesture that nonetheless drew silence across the table. Every glance shifted toward her, curious and evaluating, so a man across from them began slicing into his eggs. "What did the two of you do, your first date night?" Elena inhaled sharply. She didn't remember half the fabricated backstory Callum had supplied last night. She parted her lips uncertainly. "We went to a jazz bar on 5th, Callum said with perfect ease, not missing a beat. His voice was warm enough to make even Elena almost believe it. Elena has a weakness for live music. Several relatives hummed approvingly. Elena kept her eyes lowered, grateful and embarrassed all at once. When breakfast ended, guests began drifting out in groups, but Elena barely had time to breathe before Margaret Hale approached with the unmistakable air of someone who had come for answers. "Walk with me," Margaret said, offering no room for refusal. Elena followed her through the sunroom and into the quieter East Hall. Margaret clasped her hands in front of her, studying her with a gaze sharp enough to peel back layers. "You're polite." "That's good," Margaret said. "And patient. Even better. But I must ask," her voice dropped, "do you know what you've committed to?" Elena swallowed. I'm trying to be what Callum needs." Margaret's eyes narrowed at that answer. "Needs," she echoed. "You are not the first woman to stand by him during Christmas." The implication stung like cold air. "And I pray," Margaret continued softly, "you will not vanish as she did." Before Elena could ask what she meant, a servant appeared to inform Margaret she was needed in the kitchen, leaving Elena standing alone and shaken. She found Callum in the foyer adjusting his watch as if nothing in the world could unsettle him. The memory of Margaret's words burned through her. "Callum," she said quietly, "can we talk?" He hesitated barely, but she saw it before nodding towards a side hallway. They walked until they reached the library, its dim light and scent of old books giving the room a solemn air. Elena faced him. People keep looking at me, like they're waiting for something or comparing me to someone. His jaw tensed. Ignore them. That's hard when they think I look like her. At that, he froze. The bookshelves behind him seemed to absorb the silence. Who told you that? He asked. It doesn't matter, she whispered. Is it true? He didn't answer. Instead, he moved past her as if the question physically stung him. The conversation dissolved into an uncomfortable pause. Elena turned, letting her eyes wander across the shelves. That was when she noticed it, the same photo she had seen last night, still turned face down on the table. A strange pull urged her forward. Before she could stop herself, she lifted the frame again. The woman in the photo smiled gently, leaning into Callum's shoulder as though she belonged there. And yes, she did resemble Elena, not identical but close enough that anyone would notice. Her heart throbbed painfully. You shouldn't touch that. Callum's voice cut through the air. Elena turned. He stood near the door, expression, taut eyes unreadable but burning with something fierce and conflicted. I'm sorry, she murmured, setting the photo down. I didn't mean to pry. His steps were slow but deliberate as he approached. He reached past her, flipping the photograph face down again, with a quiet finality. That part of my life, he said, voice calm but low, is not relevant to what we're doing. It feels relevant, Elena whispered. Everyone's acting like I'm stepping into someone else's shadow. His gaze finally met hers. For a moment she saw a raw flicker of something. Sorrow, fear, guilt before he locked it away. You're not her, he said, and you don't need to worry about my past. But they do, Elena countered. And they think I'm... He stepped closer, so close she could feel the faint warmth radiating from him. You're Elena, he said the words almost a whisper. His expression softened for a fraction of a second. Focus on that. Before she could respond, voices echoed from down the hall, calling them back to the celebration. Callum took a slow breath, reassembling his composure. We should go. Elena followed him out, but her thoughts stayed behind in the dim library with the face-down photograph. As she stepped back into the sound and light of the Hale family, one truth settled cold and heavy in her chest. She wasn't just pretending to be Callum's wife. She was pretending not to notice the ghost she was standing in for. Elena woke with the soft glow of morning pressing through the curtains, but the warmth in the room did nothing to ease the cold knot in her stomach. Her gaze fell instantly to the silver ring on her hand. The faint scratch on its surface caught the light, the same scratch she'd seen on the ring in the old photograph, on the hand of the woman who looked like her. She touched it gently as if the truth might rise to meet her fingertips. Why had Callum given her this ring? And why had he apologized for it in the dark last night? A soft knock at her door startled her. Breakfast in 10, a housemaid announced. The footsteps faded, leaving Elena alone with her racing thoughts. When she entered the dining hall, the atmosphere had shifted. Guests glanced at her with greater curiosity than the day before, some whispering, some watching, with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She sensed expectation, or dread. She couldn't tell which. A woman at the far end of the table murmured to another, If she leaves too, I don't know what Callum will become. Elena swallowed hard. Leaves too, she slid into her seat beside Callum. He didn't look at her at first, but when he finally did, his gaze lingered a little too long, as though checking to make sure she was really there. Margaret was the one to break the silence. I trust you slept well, she said smoothly. I did, thank you. Margaret nodded, studying her over the rim of her teacup. Good. Christmas Eve will be... important. Important, Elena wanted to ask how, but Margaret stood and excused herself before she could form the words. Breakfast dissolved into fragmented conversations, but Elena caught only pieces, hopeful, fragile, different from before. Each fragment burrowed deeper under her skin. Afterward, as guests drifted off, Callum approached. You look pale, he said quietly. Are you all right? I'm fine. She wasn't, but she didn't know how to ask what she needed to ask. We should go over the evening's events, he added. There will be questions. Yes, she murmured. I'm sure there will be. He didn't seem to notice the edge in her tone. Callum led her to a smaller sitting room, its walls lined with old family portraits. They practiced their scripted answers, how they fell in love, the inside jokes they shared, the holiday rituals they celebrated together. His delivery was smooth, perfect, rehearsed. hers less so. Halfway through, he paused. A strand of hair had fallen across her face, and he reached without thinking, gently brushing it back. The warmth of his touch lingered longer than it should have, his fingers hovering for a moment near her cheek. Elena's breath caught. Callum's eyes widened as if realizing what he'd done, and he jerked his hand away. "We should continue," he said stiffly, but neither of them moved. To break the tension, Elena suggested helping in the kitchen with dinner prep. To her surprise, Callum agreed to join her. The head cook welcomed them with an approving smile, thrusting a cutting board into Elena's hands. "Chop these," she instructed. Elena tried. She really did, but the knife slipped, slicing a carrot crookedly. "You're holding it wrong," Callum murmured behind her. Before she could respond, he stepped close, too close, placing his hands lightly over hers. His chest brushed her back as he guided her grip. Their hands moved together, slow and controlled. Elena froze. Her heart didn't. "Like this," he whispered, breath stirring the hair near her ear. She nearly dropped the knife, and then just as quickly as he'd come close, he stepped back, clearing his throat as though the moment hadn't just happened. "You're doing fine," he muttered. The cook hid a knowing smile. Later, Callum invited her to walk in the garden. Snow dusted the hedges in delicate patterns, and the late afternoon light painted everything gold. It was quiet enough to hear their footsteps crunching across the path. "My father loved this place," Callum said softly, surprising her. "He used to bring me here to teach me about responsibility. Tradition." He paused. "He died the same month Amelia disappeared." Elena looked at him sharply, but he stared straight ahead. "I'm sorry," she said. He gave a faint nod. It was a difficult time. Something in his voice, something raw, tugged at her. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. Not this time. When they returned inside, the house buzzed with preparations for the evening gathering. The moment they entered, several relatives insisted they join the dance scheduled before dinner. Elena and Callum should open the floor, someone cheered. Elena blinked. Callum seemed equally unprepared, but he offered his hand. "Shall we?" he murmured. Her fingers trembled as she placed her hand in his. Soft music filled the room, and Callum's hand slid to her waist. His touch was steady, sure, the touch of someone who didn't have to pretend to lead. Their bodies moved in tandem, closer with each turning step. When she looked up, his eyes were already on hers, and suddenly the room felt too small. "Callum," she whispered. His gaze dipped to her lips. They leaned in, slow, inevitable. But then something flickered in his expression. Fear, memory, a ghost she couldn't name. He stepped back abruptly. "I need a moment," he muttered, already turning away. Elena stood alone on the dance floor, heat rising to her cheeks, heart pounding in the hollow space he'd left behind. Later, trying to escape the noise of the crowd, she wandered upstairs. She passed the library again, the place that held more secrets than she wanted to admit, and moved toward a door left slightly ajar. Inside, she found another framed picture on a side table. A young woman, dark hair, soft eyes. Amelia. This time the resemblance was unmistakable. As Elena stared, she heard footsteps. A housemaid whispered to another behind the doorway. "She used to stay in that room," one murmured, "right before she disappeared. And the ring he gave the new girl." "Isn't that?" Elena's breath stopped. She clutched the ring on her finger. It wasn't just similar, it was the same. And suddenly she understood why the walls in this house felt haunted, because she was living in someone else's shadow, wearing someone else's place, and worst of all, wearing someone else's ring. Elena lay awake long before sunrise, staring at the faint outline of the ring on her finger. The scratch across the band, the same scratch she had seen in the old photo, felt heavier than the silver itself. She pressed her thumb to it, trying to steady her breath. Last night she had seen the room where Amelia once stayed. Today was day 4, and for reasons she didn't have the courage to name, she feared the house was holding its breath with her. Downstairs, the morning was tense. Callum sat at the breakfast table, shoulders rigid, fingers tapping the porcelain cup. He didn't look at her when she entered, but the moment she sat down, he finally lifted his gaze. "You're up early," he said. "So are you." He tried for a small smile, but it faltered instantly. Around them, relatives exchanged glances, whispering behind napkins. Elena caught fragments. Day 4. Hope it lasts. Don't let it repeat. Repeat what? Before she could gather her thoughts, Margaret spoke. The two of you should spend the day together, she suggested, not quite a request. Christmas Eve is important. Elena nodded stiffly. Callum's face softened. We were planning to, he lied to spare them all further scrutiny. Minutes later, away from the curious eyes of the family, they stepped into the cold winter air. Snow clung to the branches overhead, turning the world into a delicate white cathedral. Callum walked beside her in silence, hands in his pockets, tension rolling off him in waves. Where are we going? Elena asked. A place I used to visit as a kid, he replied. Thought you might like it. The town square was transformed for the holiday strings of lights, vendors selling cocoa children bundled in bright scarves. Elena watched it all, with a mix of awe and nostalgia she hadn't felt since childhood. For a little while the ache in her chest eased. Callum bought 2 cups of rich hot chocolate. When he handed one to her, their fingers brushed accidentally, or maybe not. Her heart stumbled. You've barely smiled, he said quietly. Do you want me to pretend much? She replied. No, he whispered. I want the truth. She wasn't sure she could give him that truth because even now just being beside him made her chest warm and fragile all at once. Instead, she sipped the cocoa and let the silence stretch between them. As they walked through the park, Elena slipped on a patch of ice. Callum reacted instantly, grabbing her waist and pulling her against him. Her breath hitched. His hold lingered too long, long enough that she felt the steady rise and fall of his breathing, the warmth beneath his coat. You okay? He murmured. Yes, she breathed, though her heartbeat was a wildfire. When he finally let go, the air between them felt charged. They continued walking until the path led to a small gazebo dusted with snow. Callum hesitated, then gestured for her to sit beside him. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying hints of memory. My father used to bring me here, Callum said, voice low. He'd talk about responsibility, legacy, what he hoped I'd become. You miss him, Elena said. Every day. He paused, especially around Christmas. Elena placed her hand over his. She expected him to pull away just like he always did, but instead he turned his palm upward and laced their fingers together. The simple act stole her breath. Elena, he said softly. You're different from what I expected. She stared at him. What did you expect? Someone who wanted the money, or the attention, or the name? His voice dropped. Not someone who throws herself in front of danger for a stranger. Her chest tightened. Callum. He looked at her like he was memorizing her, and slowly, inevitably, he leaned closer. When their lips met, it was gentle but burning. A kiss that tasted like a confession neither of them dared to speak. He deepened it, one hand rising to cradle her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin with startling tenderness. She melted into him, feeling the world narrow to the warmth of his mouth and the safety of his arms. For the first time since she stepped into this house, she didn't feel like a replacement. She just felt wanted. They returned to the estate well after dark. Elena climbed the stairs to her room with her heart still pounding, her lips tingling. She was dizzy with it, this fragile, terrifying hope. But the moment she closed her door, something slipped from Callum's coat, a small silver key. It glinted on the floor. Elena crouched to pick it up. The symbol engraved on it made her breath catch. She'd seen it before on the wooden box in Callum's room, the one he kept locked, the one the servants whispered about. Her pulse raced as she crept down the hall. The house was quiet, asleep around her. At his door she hesitated, but only for a moment. The key slid into the lock with an ease that felt like fate. Inside the wooden box lay a stack of letters tied with ribbon worn from age. The handwriting was soft, looping, unmistakably feminine. She unfolded the top letter, her vision blurring as she read. If you're reading this, Callum, it means you found someone who looks at you the way I used to, someone who reminds you you're capable of love. If you choose her, I hope she's not a replacement. I hope she's real for you. A choked breath escaped her. She reached for the next letter. If she wears my ring, then I know you're not letting go. Elena stared at the ring on her finger, Amelia's ring. And in that moment, the beautiful night crumbled. He hadn't chosen her. He had chosen someone who fit a shape he lost, someone who looked like a memory. When she looked up, the shadows in the room felt deeper, colder, like the house was holding its breath again. And for the first time, Elena wondered if falling for him had been a mistake destined to break her. Elena didn't sleep. She sat, curled on the edge of her bed, the letter trembling in her hands as the first pale light of morning crept across the floor. The words blurred every time she reread them. If she wears my ring, I know you're not letting go. Her stomach twisted so tightly she thought she might be sick. She had spent the night believing everything that happened between her and Callum was real, but now she wasn't sure any of it belonged to her. By the time she went downstairs, the house was unusually quiet. The relatives who normally filled the hall with chatter watched her with muted concern. Their glances weren't curious anymore. They were wary, almost pitying. A few whispered behind their hands, "She looks shaken. Day 5? Not again." Elena kept her head down as she sat at the breakfast table. Callum arrived moments later, his expression unreadable, but the tension in his shoulders unmistakable. He didn't greet her. He didn't ask if she slept. He didn't even look in her direction for long. "Morning," he finally said, but the word was brittle. "Morning," she whispered. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Elena's mind spiraled with questions she couldn't form. Why had he given her Amelia's ring? Why hadn't he told her? Why had he kissed her like she mattered, then hidden all of this? Margaret studied them from across the table, her gaze flicking between Elena's pale face and Callum's stiff posture. After a long moment, she said softly, "The 4th day is hopeful. The 5th is dangerous." The whole room froze. Elena set down her fork. "Dangerous how?" But Margaret only shook her head and rose from the table, leaving Elena with a chill crawling up her spine. She pushed back her chair. "Callum, can we talk privately?" He hesitated, barely a flicker, but she saw it before nodding. He led her out to the garden where the winter air bit at her cheeks and frost clung to the branches like fragile lace. The moment the door closed behind them, Elena took a shaky breath. "Why did you give me that ring?" she asked. Callum flinched almost imperceptibly. "Elena, it's hers," she said. "Amelia's." His jaw clenched. Snow crunched under his boots as he paced a few steps away, raking a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," Elena said, voice cracking. "Tell me why I'm wearing the ring of a woman who looks like me. A woman who disappeared." Callum turned, his expression pained. "You weren't supposed to see those letters. That's not an answer." He exhaled sharply, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "It's complicated. Try me." He took a long moment, then finally spoke. "When Amelia left, I didn't understand. I thought she abandoned me. I thought it was my fault. I kept the ring because I couldn't let go, and when you and I made this arrangement," he faltered. "The ring was there. I didn't think. You just what?" Elena whispered. "Needed someone to fill the space she left." "That's not fair," he whispered back. "Neither is this," she shot, her voice shaking. "I thought last night meant something." "It did," he said quickly, too quickly. "Really?" Tears burned behind her eyes. "Because this morning you can't even look at me." He stepped closer, but she backed away. His breath hitched at the distance she put between them. "Elena," he said softly. "We crossed a line." "The contract." "Forget the contract," she snapped. "I'm talking about us." His face paled. The panic there was unmistakable, raw, and unguarded. "We can't do this. Not again. I can't. Not again," she repeated. "So I am just..." "What?" "A stand-in, a replacement." "No," he said immediately, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Elena shook her head, laughter breaking out of her like a sob. "You know what hurts the most? For one night I believed you chose me. Not because I look like somebody else. Not because you needed to save face, but because something real was happening between us." "It was real," Callum said, a voice low and desperate. "But real things, real feelings get people hurt. And your solution is to run," she whispered. "It's to protect us both, by pushing me away." He didn't answer. The silence that followed was colder than the snow around them. "I can't stay here," Elena finally said. "Not like this." Callum's eyes widened. "Elena, no, I can't breathe in this house. I can't pretend everything's fine when I feel like I'm living someone else's life." She wiped her cheek. "Or wearing someone else's love." "Elena, please." He reached for her. She stepped out of his reach. "I'm leaving," she said. "Today." The pain that flashed across his face was sharp enough to carve through both of them. He opened his mouth, closed it, then forced himself upright, every movement stiff with restraint. "If that's what you want," he said quietly, "you're free to go." The finality in his tone hit harder than the winter wind. Elena walked past him, her boots sinking into fresh snow. She didn't look back. She couldn't, because if she saw the expression on his face again, she wasn't sure she'd have the strength to keep walking. Inside the foyer, she packed her bag with numb fingers. She slipped off the ring, Amelia's ring, and laid it on the bedside table. For a moment, she just stared at it, at the faint scratch that haunted her since the moment she put it on, then turned away before her tears fell. 10 minutes later, she stepped outside, the cold air burning her lungs. Snow drifted gently from the sky as she signaled a taxi at the gate. Her breath shook. The house behind her stood silent, imposing, shadowed by ghosts she never asked to inherit. Just as the taxi door closed, her phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. "If you let her go, you'll lose someone you love again." Her heart stopped. Inside the house, Callum read the same message, and in that instant his expression shattered as he realized what he had done. And outside, Elena's cab pulled away, disappearing into the storm. Callum didn't think. He bolted out the front door with nothing but the clothes on his back, snow stinging his face as he ran toward the gate. The cab carrying Elena was already halfway down the long drive, taillights fading into the white blur of the storm. His breath tore from his lungs, every step fueled by the same terror he'd felt years ago, terror he swore he'd never relive. "Elena," he shouted, voice cracking in the wind. No answer. The storm swallowed her name. His phone buzzed again, the same message glaring on the screen. "If you let her go, you'll lose someone you love again." Again. The words sliced through him. Amelia. The night she disappeared, the helplessness, the self-blame, the endless questions. And now Elena walking away with the same quiet devastation on the same cursed day. Behind him, hurried footsteps approached. Julian grabbed his arm. "Callum, calm down. Let go," Callum snapped, shaking him off. Julian stared at him, expression shifting from irritation to something unexpectedly grave. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" Callum growled. "Freezing up," Julian said, panicking, shutting down. "You think pushing people away protects you, but all it does is make you lose the ones you want to keep." Callum clenched his jaw, chest heaving. "I never wanted to lose her." "Then what the hell are you still doing here?" Julian demanded. "Go." Callum didn't need to hear more. He sprinted back inside, grabbing his coat from the hook just as a familiar voice called from the staircase. She went toward the old access road. Lydia stepped into view, her expression solemn. "The one that loops around the ridge. Taxis use it when the main road freezes." Callum froze. "You sent me that message." Lydia met his eyes without flinching. "Someone had to. I'm not letting you make the same mistake twice." His breath caught. "Mistake? Amelia didn't leave because she stopped loving you," Lydia said quietly. "She left because she was scared of dying in front of you, scared you'd be trapped watching her fade." Her voice shook. "We thought hiding the truth was protecting you. We were wrong." Callum's chest tightened painfully. Years of confusion, guilt, and grief pressed in from every angle. "You let a ghost dictate how you treat the living." Lydia continued. "But Elena is not Amelia. She's real. She's here. And if you don't go after her right now, you're going to lose the best thing that's happened to you since I know," he whispered. "I know." Lydia stepped back, gesturing toward the door. "Then go." Without another word, Callum ran. Snow pelted his face as he raced down the driveway, lungs burning, heart slamming against his ribs. He didn't stop until he reached the old access road, a narrow, winding path now half buried under fresh snow. "Elena," he shouted again, voice hoarse. Nothing but wind. He forced himself forward, scanning the road for tracks. Tire marks cut through the snow, heading toward the bend where the forest thickened. He jogged along them, boots slipping on the ice, but he didn't slow. At the curve in the road, he spotted something, footprints leading off the path and into the woods. Elena. His breath caught. She must have gotten out of the taxi. He plunged into the trees, branches snagging his coat, snow bearing his ankles. He followed the footprints until they suddenly staggered, then veered sharply. A thud echoed faintly ahead. Callum's heart lurched. He burst through a cluster of bushes and stopped so abruptly the breath left his body. Elena, she lay crumpled near a fallen branch, one leg half hidden by snow, her hair scattered across the white ground. She wasn't unconscious. Her fingers twitched, reaching as though trying to mush herself up, but she was weak, shivering violently. Callum fell to his knees beside her, gathering her into his arms as carefully as he could. "Elena, God, are you hurt?" His voice broke. "Talk to me." She blinked slowly, her lashes dusted with frost. "Callum, what? What are you doing here? I came to find you." His arms tightened around her, desperation spilling into every word. "I wasn't going to let you disappear. Not again. Not ever." Her breath hitched a fragile cloud of warmth against his neck. "But you pushed me away." "I was wrong," he whispered fiercely. "I was terrified, not of you, of losing you the way I lost her. And instead of fighting for you, I ran. I hurt you. I know that. And I'm sorry, more sorry than I've ever been for anything in my life." Elena swallowed the movement, slow and shaky. You didn't come for her," no, he said immediately. "I came for you." His forehead pressed to hers. "I'm done letting ghosts make decisions for me." Snow drifted softly around them, catching in his hair and melting against her chilled skin. For a long moment they simply breathed, the silence filled with everything they hadn't said. Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm not her Callum." "I know," he said. "You couldn't be. You're Elena. You're the woman who threw herself at a stranger's attacker, the woman who laughs at burnt cookies, the woman who looks at Christmas lights like they still mean magic." His voice cracked. "You're the woman He stopped himself, but she heard the word he didn't finish. Elena's shivering eased just a little. "Then why did you let me leave?" "Fear," he admitted, "but I'm not letting it win this time." Carefully, he shifted to lift her. She clung to him weakly, her head resting against his shoulder. "Callum," she murmured. Don't drop me." He let out a breath that was nearly a laugh, nearly a sob. "I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not ever again." As he carried her back toward the road and the storm easing around them, his grip tightened, not out of fear of losing her to the snow, but out of fear of losing her to himself. And for the first time since the night they met, Elena let herself believe he might truly mean it. Callum carried Elena through the thinning snowstorm, his breath ragged, his arms locked around her as if he feared she might dissolve into the cold. The cabin near the ridge came into view, a small emergency shelter used by hikers, and relief washed through him so sharply it almost hurt. He pushed the door open with his shoulder and stepped inside. Warmth greeted them in the form of a small gas heater humming in the corner. He lowered Elena onto the narrow cot, kneeling beside her as trembling overtook her again. "Stay awake," he urged, brushing melting flakes from her hair. "Please, Elena, talk to me." She blinked slowly, her voice a fragile whisper. "You shouldn't be here." "I should have been here sooner," he murmured, pulling the thick blanket around her. "I should never have let you walk out that door." Her fingers curled weakly around the blanket. "You let me go." His throat tightened. "I know." For a long moment neither spoke. The cabin hummed with the soft rattle of wind and the sound of Callum's uneven breathing. Slowly, color returned to Elena's cheeks and her eyes sharpened. "Why did you come after me?" she asked, voice still shaking. He swallowed hard, shifting closer. "Because I couldn't lose you. Not again." A flicker of pain crossed her face. Again she echoed, "Like her." Callum inhaled sharply, realization slicing through him. "Elena, no. This isn't about replacing her." "But I look like her," she said, meeting his gaze head on. "Everyone keeps saying it. They stare at me like I'm her ghost walking through the halls." "You're not a ghost," he said fiercely. "You're the only thing that's felt alive in that house in years." She blinked, startled by the intensity of his tone. He sat beside her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. "Amelia left," he said quietly, "because she was sick. She didn't want me to watch her die. Her family hid it from me. Lydia told me the truth today." His voice cracked. "I spent so long thinking I drove her away that I built walls so thick I couldn't see the people standing right in front of me." "People like me," Elena whispered. "Yes," he breathed. "Like you, especially you." Her eyes glistened. Then why did you push me away? He let out a shaky breath. Because the closer I got to you, the more terrified I became. I didn't want to repeat what happened with Amelia. I didn't want to feel that kind of loss again. His gaze softened. But losing you hurt worse than the fear ever could. Elena's breath trembled. Her voice came softer than snow falling outside. It hurt me too, you know. Callum lowered his head. I know, he said, and I'm sorry. For the ring, for the lies by omission, for letting fear decide my future. He looked up again, eyes raw. I want to tell you everything. No hiding, no contracts, just truth. She drew her knees closer beneath the blanket. Then tell me the truth now. Callum moved to sit beside her close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden box, the one she had opened in his room. He set it gently on her lap. I held on to this because I couldn't say goodbye to Amelia, he said. She didn't get to leave on her own terms. This was all I had left. Elena lowered her gaze to the box. And giving me the ring? A mistake, he said immediately. Not because it was hers, but because you deserve more than something from my past. You deserve something that belongs to you and only you. He opened the box. Inside, the old ring lay beside a bundle of letters tied with ribbon. Callum took the ring out, held it for a moment, then closed his fist around it with a trembling exhale. I'm saying goodbye now, he whispered. He set the ring back inside the box and closed it for the last time. The gesture felt final, quietly brave. Elena's throat tightened. Callum. He reached into his other pocket and produced a small velvet case. Her breath caught. He opened it not with the flourish of a proposal, but with a gentleness that made her heart ache. Inside was a delicate band of gold engraved with her name. This isn't a proposal, he said softly. Not yet. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. He held the box between them. I'm asking for a chance to show you who I am when I'm not drowning in fear. A chance to prove that what I feel for you is real. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Callum leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. I'm in love with you, Elena. I have been since the second day. I was just too afraid to admit it. Hot tears slipped down her cheeks. You hurt me. I know, he whispered, and I will spend as long as it takes making that right. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of him seep in through the storm inside her. I'm not ready to say yes, she whispered. He nodded, brushing a tear from her cheek. Then I'll wait. She opened her eyes. The sincerity in his gaze was deeper than anything she had seen in him before. Something steadier, something healed. Slowly she reached out and closed the velvet box with her fingertips. But I'm ready to see who you can be. Callum exhaled in relief, leaning his forehead to hers again. That's all I need. Snow fell silently outside the cabin window as the two of them sat together, not as a man running from his past and a woman trapped in someone else's shadow, but as two people finally choosing to face the road ahead, side by side. 6 months later, Elena pushed open the door of the little bookshop where she worked, a soft chime greeting her as sunlight spilled across the wooden floors. Spring had melted into early summer, washing the town in warm gold and fresh blossoms. Her life had settled into something gentle, something steady, a routine she had built with her own hands. She had a small apartment, a job she liked, and a quiet sort of peace she hadn't known she needed. But some nights when the town hung its first strands of Christmas lights far too early but full of charm, she felt a familiar ache, a memory of snow and a pair of dark eyes she still dreamed about. She told herself she had moved on, that she was healing. But healing wasn't forgetting. The shop bell chimed again. Elena looked up automatically and froze. Callum Hale stood in the doorway, dressed simply in a dark shirt and rolled sleeves, snow no longer clinging to him, storm no longer in his eyes. He looked softer, different, human in a way she had never seen when she first met him. Her breath caught. Callum. He smiled, small, uncertain, hopeful. Hi. For a moment neither moved. Then Elena stepped out from behind the counter, each quiet footstep echoing in the stillness of the shop. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to see you, he said, but not until I could show up as the man you deserve. She frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means, he said, taking a slow breath, I spent months in therapy. I talked about Amelia. I talked about the fear. I talked about losing you. I've been learning how to live without walls. His gaze deepened. Because I didn't want to come back to you as the version of myself that hurt you. Emotion pricked behind her ribs. Callum. He stepped closer, stopping when they were only a breath apart. I thought about you every day. Her lips parted, but she stayed still, waiting, needing more. Callum seemed to understand. He didn't touch her. He didn't rush. He simply opened his palm. I brought something, he said softly. She looked down. The velvet box from the cabin. Carefully, he opened it. Inside, the ring glowed softly under the shop's warm light, new gold clean lines engraved with her name. I'm not here to ask you for forever, he said. Not unless you're ready. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. But I am here to ask for a beginning. Elena felt her throat tighten as the months apart folded into this single moment. She reached out, brushing her fingers against the ring, then looking back at him. You really changed, she whispered. I had to, he replied. For me, and for the chance that maybe one day you'd let me try again. Her heartbeat fluttered. Callum, Before she could finish, the shop lights flickered as the timer for the Christmas in July decorations switched on. Strings of warm white bulbs lit the window, washing them both in a glow that made the moment feel impossibly familiar. Callum glanced at the lights, then back at her. Seems like a sign. She laughed softly, unexpectedly, beautifully. You and your timing. Terrible, I know, he said. But I'm learning. Elena took a steadying breath. And I'm not the same person I was either. I know, he murmured. You're stronger now. Maybe, she said. Or maybe I just needed to know you saw me. Really saw me. His voice softened. Elena, I've never seen anyone the way I see you. For the first time since that winter night, she let herself believe him. Slowly, she closed the box with her fingertips. She wasn't saying yes, not yet, but she wasn't saying no. Let's try, she said quietly. His exhale was almost a laugh of relief. Yes, she whispered. Let's start there. Callum didn't kiss her. Instead, he pulled her into a warm, steady embrace, one that felt more like a promise than any ring ever could. Outside, the lights glowed like captured stars. Inside, Elena let her head rest against his shoulder, letting the moment settle around them with gentle certainty. Maybe love wasn't about grand gestures. Maybe it was about choosing someone again and again, even after the first heartbreak. Maybe it was about coming back with honesty instead of fear. And maybe, just maybe, Christmas miracles didn't only happen in the snow. Before you go, if you were, Elena, would you have given Callum another chance? Do you believe people can truly change for love? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think about their journey. And if stories of second chances, healing, and winter romance speak to your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for the next story. There's always another tale waiting, and you won't want to miss it.